It's 1 week before Memorial Day, and we're camping 20 minutes from Rock Island National Cemetery. We're going to tell just a few stories of the thousands of heroes that are laid to rest here. Arsenal Island is an active Army base. If you do not have a DoD or PIV government-issued card, then you'll need to stop at the Visitor's Center to get a visitor's pass. Use the Moline, Illinois bridge to access the Visitor's Center. You'll need a valid state ID. The Rock Island Cemetery was established in 1863. It is the final resting place of soldiers who served in the Civil War, the Mexican War, Indian Wars, Spanish-American War, World Wars I and II, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, and Iraq Wars. There are currently 27,000 headstones and 37,000 buried on the grounds. Throughout the cemetery, there are bell towers that play songs during visiting hours. One of the heroes here is Edward J. Moskala. On April 9th, 1945, Private First Class Edward Moskala advanced up Kakuzu Ridge in the pre-dawn hours during the Battle of Okinawa. Japanese forces were entrenched on the ridge. PFC Moskala took out 2 machine gun nests and volunteered to stay behind with 8 other men to provide cover for the company's retreat. The 9 men withstood a 3-hour firefight with the enemy, then used smoke grenades to cover their escape. Back safely at the bottom of the ridge, Moskala heard wounded had been left behind. He charged back up the ridge and provided cover for the wounded. He was killed while aiding a wounded soldier. Mr. Moskala was 23 years old. John Jr. Willie enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942. He was one of the 29 Navajos who developed the Unbreakable Code based on their native language. Private First Class Willie and the Code Talkers saw action in the Pacific Theater, and Willie was present at the battles of Tarawa and Saipan. PFC Willie returned to the United States in 1945 and was honorably separated from the Marine Corps. He would take ill and die in 1962 at the age of 42. John could never talk about his war contribution because the Code Talker program was classified until 1968. Recognition of the Code Talker's contribution to the war effort was slow in coming. The original 29 were recognized with the Congressional Gold Medal in 2000. Only 9 were still living at the presentation in 2001. Ralph Anthony Ignatowski failed the physical exam when he first tried to enlist in the Marines. He tried again, taking a friend's urine sample with him, and this time passed. Private Ignatowski arrived on Iwo Jima on February 19th, 1945. On February 20th, he was wounded by shrapnel and returned to duty the same day. On February 23rd, Private Ignatowski was one of the 6 in the Marine Rifle Company who climbed to the top of Mount Suribachi and raised the American flag. On March 4th, Private Ignatowski was captured. From the book Flags of Our Fathers, John Bradley said Private Ignatowski was the buddy he was paired up with in the Marines. He said they were pinned down and someone fell injured, and he ran to help. When he returned, his buddy was gone. I could see all around, but he wasn't there. 3 days later, they found him. The Japanese had pulled him underground, where he had been tortured. Private Ralph Ignatowski, Iggy to his friends, was 18 years old. The Rock Island National Cemetery area was set aside to bury Union soldiers who died while serving as guards at the large Confederate prison that was established on the island during the Civil War. It contained the graves of 136 prison guards. 49 were members of the 108th U.S. Colored Infantry. During the Civil War, 12,000 Confederate POWs were confined here. Nearly 1 of 6 would die of exposure during the harsh cold winters, malnutrition, or diseases such as smallpox. 1,950 would perish on the island. We've told the stories of just a few of the 37,000 that sacrificed for this country and now lie to rest here. There are over 1.3 million laid to rest in our 50 states and countries abroad that gave their lives for the freedoms we enjoy. Memorial Day is a holiday in the United States for honoring and mourning the U.S. military personnel who died while serving in the United States Armed Forces. When you're on the island, you'll want to visit the Rock Island Arsenal Museum. It's the Army's second oldest museum, opening in 1905. The museum covers most of the known history of the island, from the Fox and Sauk Indians' use of the island during the summer months. The Treaty of St. Louis, 1804, was signed by Sauk and Fox chiefs that did not have the authority to cede tribal land and probably did not understand the treaty. The Sauk and Fox deeply resented the treaty. It led to their support of Britain during the War of 1812. The U.S. Army built Fort Armstrong on Rock Island in 1816. It would remain an active fort until 1836, and then would be reopened in 1840 to 1845. During the Civil War, the island was used as a prison for Confederate soldiers. Over 12,000 were held here. With all the young men in fighting units, Men 45 years and older were assigned as guards. They were nicknamed the Graybeards. Men from the 108th Colored Troops also served as guards on the island, starting in 1864. In 1862, Rock Island Arsenal was established by an act of Congress. The Army would establish a foundry and armory here, manufacturing both military equipment and ordnance. The arsenal manufactured harness and cavalry leather equipment from 1875 to 1921. The arsenal would produce over 346,000 Springfield Model 1903 rifles between 1904 to 1919. During World War I, the arsenal would reach a peak of producing 1,000 artillery shells per day and several small items the troops used daily. As men were deployed to fight the war, women stepped in to take their place, reaching a peak of 1,400 female employees. Many women worked the most dangerous job, filling 155mm shells and setting fuses. Black women were hired to fill custodial positions. Cora D. Wilfond was hired in 1918 to run hurry-up deliveries on her motorcycle. And Milton Howard, one of the longest tenured employees, working from 1866 to 1922. In 1919, the arsenal would start production of 100 Mark 8 tanks. One of these tanks sits outside of the museum at 34 feet in length, nearly 12 feet wide, and 10 feet high. It had a crew of 10, a range of 50 miles, and a max speed of 5.25 miles per hour. During World War II, the materials received and shipped from the arsenal would increase 17 times. 4,500 women worked at the arsenal. They made up 38% of the workforce. The Browning Model M1919A4 was made at the arsenal. The M1919 is a .30 caliber medium machine gun that was widely used during World War II and the Korean War. The M20A1B1 rocket launcher, or Super Bazooka, was the arsenal's most published contribution to the Korean War. Within a week of being received, 7 Soviet-built North Korean tanks were destroyed by the weapon in a decisive battle. The arsenal was involved in several rocket launching systems. Today, the arsenal is active in the design to meet the needs of America's warfighters. It has the ability for initial alloying and casting of raw materials through all the manufacturing processes required to deliver a finished product. The Rock Island Arsenal Museum is open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and admission is free. There are several pieces of military equipment on display outdoors. This Sherman tank was disabled by German rounds at the Battle of the Bulge. The yellow paint shows where enemy anti-tank rounds hit the tank. Take a drive around the base and take in the beauty of the island and the buildings that were built out of limestone in the mid-1800s. Quarters 1 was completed in 1871. It was occupied continuously until 2008. It was the second largest residence in the federal inventory behind the White House. Visitors to Quarters 1 include Charles Lindbergh, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and General John Pershing. Before you leave the island, check out Government Bridge in Lock and Dam 15. Lock and Dam 15 Visitor Center is within the base, so visit it first. The lock and dam were completed in 1934. The main lock is 110 feet wide by 600 feet long. The auxiliary lock is 110 feet wide by 360 feet long. Lock and Dam 15 Visitor Center has a lot of information about the lock, dam, river, animals in the area, and an observation deck. It took less than 15 minutes for them to get this push or tug through the lock. The water is raised in the lock by opening valves to the high side of the dam. It is lowered by opening valves to the low side. The roller dam is 1,203 feet long, making it the largest roller dam in the world, and a great place for the blue heron to fish. We're going to leave the base through the Rock Island Gate. Once off the base, we'll take a right to get to Fort Armstrong and Government Bridge before leaving the island. Fort Armstrong was built in this area in 1816. It was named after John Armstrong, the Secretary of War under President James Madison. A series of fires destroyed the original fort by 1856. In 1916, a replica of the blockhouse was built to celebrate the centennial. The first railroad bridge to cross the Mississippi was built in 1856 just upriver from this location. As the trains got bigger and the loads got heavier, a new bridge was needed, so one was built here in 1872. In 1896, Government Bridge would be built in the same location using the piers from the 1872 bridge. Government Bridge is a double-deck bridge with 2 railroad tracks on the top deck and 2 lanes of automobile traffic originally horse and wagon, and a lane of pedestrian traffic on each side of the bridge. The bridge length is 1,608 feet, with the swing span being the longest span at 365 feet. The swing span can rotate 360 degrees. Originally powered with steam, it was updated to a 60 horsepower electric motor. The bridge was given a stress test in 2006, and they found that it had only used 10% of its life. With the bridge swung out of the way, the pusher tug can proceed through the lock. A push tug will push 3 barges wide and 5 long. It will push 9 barges into the lock, 3 wide by 3 long. These will take nearly all the 110 width and 600 foot length of the lock. These will be unhooked and pulled through the lock with a cable if going upstream, or they'll be allowed to float out of the lock going downstream. The push tug and 6 barges will then process through the lock and reconnect with the 9 barges, then proceed along its route. The time to complete this can vary. It took 45 minutes for this crew to get these barges through the lock. Until the next one, take care, and remember the freedoms that we enjoy were not free.